Hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Safe Side, a monthly podcast hosted by the editors of Safety and Health magazine, the official magazine of the National Safety Council. This is Alan Ferguson, Associate Editor at Safety and Health. With me, as always, are my fellow Associate Editors, Barry Bettino and Kevin Drewley. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the new year.
Hey, Alan. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yep, Happy New Year, and we're thankful that you've joined us for this January 2026 episode, number 71 in our history. This month's episode is sponsored by Family Safety and Health magazine. We know that many of you out there have had a unique journey into the safety profession, and we'd like to hear more about it for our My Story feature in our magazine. You can submit a personal story or encourage a safety colleague to do so by emailing us at safehealth@nsc.org. In this month's episode, we'll examine some highlights from the January issue of Safety and Health and discuss in-house first aid response teams with Ridgefield, Connecticut Fire Chief Rommie Duckworth, who's also a board member with the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians. Finally, we'll share some stories you may have missed in What Else, our monthly In Case You Missed It segment. Is everybody ready? Let's go.
In many ways, the January issue of Safety and Health is a microcosm of the conversational topics and focus areas that greet many of us as we embark upon a new year. There's discussion of managing the cold, a feature related to health awareness, and a glance at matters designed to make you think or say, wow, that's interesting. Barry writes about the first two items in that set. An article that covers working in the cold focuses on ways to stay safe and warm during winter work. It's well known that winter weather can change quickly, and experts offer strategies for proper preparedness and communication. It also is interesting to be reminded that low temperatures can limit the body's thirst sensation, so it's especially vital to prioritize staying hydrated when working in the cold. Next, a feature about managing diabetes at work explores more about diabetes, a chronic condition in which the body does not produce enough insulin, or any at all. Why might workers feel reluctant to disclose that they have diabetes? What can employers do to accommodate them? You'll learn the answers to these questions and others in this story. Our January issue also makes sure not to forget a certain old acquaintance, as Alan revisits expert territory with another round of OSHA's most interesting cases. The series comprises cases from what now is an annual technical session at the NSC Safety Congress and Expo. While the narratives certainly provide the intrigue that the sessions intend, there also are key lessons to help safety professionals prevent similar incidents. And as always, you'll find lots more in the January issue of Safety and Health beyond what we've discussed here. So please check your mailbox or visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com.
What do you know about the benefits of mindfulness? How about the meanings behind road signs? And did you realize that dehydration and exposure to UV rays are winter hazards too? These topics are among the many covered in the Issues of Family Safety and Health, a quarterly publication brought to you by the National Safety Council and the writers of Safety and Health. To stay up to date on the latest news from Family Safety and Health, and for more information about subscribing to our monthly newsletter, visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/family.
Emergency medical situations at work can range from an asthma attack to broken bones or worse. That's where an in-person first aid response team can come in. Made up of volunteers who are colleagues, this team can be of critical importance in the minutes between when an incident occurs at the workplace and when emergency medical services professionals arrive. And with National Heart Month coming up in February, response teams can do plenty to be prepared. With us this month to talk about these teams is Rommie Duckworth, who serves as chief of the Ridgefield Fire Department in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and is a member of the board of directors for the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians. Welcome, Chief Duckworth. Thanks so much for being with us on the Safe Side this month.
Well, thank you very much. It's a thrill to be here. Passionate about safety and safety education, and although I don't do as much direct in-person training as I used to, I'm directing a lot of it. So I'm really excited to be able to get the information out here and excited about the work you guys are doing.
Well, we wanted to start with you with, few workplaces are the same. With that in mind, what are some first steps to keep in mind when you want to set up an in-house first aid response team?
Well, the very first thing is to gauge your needs and do a needs assessment. Now, it could be a formal needs assessment, depending on where you work. Maybe you're used to doing needs assessments and that kind of thing, or just really taking a pencil and paper and writing down what kinds of emergencies might we encounter here. Now, just about anybody in almost any workplace might encounter slips and falls, or maybe someone who suffers a cardiac emergency, like a heart attack, or maybe goes into cardiac arrest. But you may have special types of issues at your workplace where you may be using glassware in a lab, and breaks are frequent, and anything from a simple to a major laceration may be an issue. But you want to be realistic about the types of issues that are going to be common in your workplace, or maybe uncommon, but somebody needs to do something about. So that's your needs assessment. And once you have that listed, your next step is going to be gauging the resources that you have available or that you can get. And that's going to be everything from first aid bags to the people who may be on your team to respond. Maybe contractors, perhaps. You think about it and you go, well, there are contracted security personnel at my facility or my workplace, and they may be a part of this. And gosh, I don't know whether they have training or not. And even if they have training, then finally, we need to gauge the processes. Well, maybe they do have training. Maybe they have bags, and gosh, I don't even know, but I don't know how they would get activated. So we gauge our processes. For example, is it appropriate in our workplace for people to call 911 directly because we don't want to delay their call for help? Or is that going to bypass a security team or a supervisor who may need to know? Or if people call 911 directly, unless someone on our safety team is a first aid response team is standing right there, they may never get activated. They might not know. So it's those needs. What realistically are we going to be dealing with? The resources, especially personnel, but also, first aid bags and phones and things like that. And then the processes. How is this supposed to work so we can, put the resources where the needs are?
So speaking of training, how much is necessary for volunteer members of a team, and what factors determine that amount of training?
Well, it's really part of the thing that we've already begun putting together, right? You gauge the needs, and the needs are going to give you an idea of the training that's necessary. If lacerations, and sometimes extreme lacerations and traumatic injuries with a lot of bleeding, is what you've gauged as your needs. Hey, we're in a workplace where we deal with a lot of sharp stuff and machines that cut people sometimes, or at least could. Then your training might include some kind of training to stop the bleed and make sure that bleeding control is a big part of that. Whereas if your workplace involves children are in the area, children in the workplace, but there may be younger people there, then we're going to want to not only learn things like how to deal with choking or CPR with adults, but with children and maybe infants. Maybe childcare or daycare is a part of your workplace. Well, then we're going to want to be ready to address that. But if it's not, if there's no way kids are going to come into your industrial facility, then we don't need to worry about that. So it really is going to be gauged on those needs and to a degree on the resources. You don't want training if only one person may be really excited to get that training and they're really capable, but gosh, they're the only ones. So it's more, that's Bob's capability, but that's not the first aid response team's capability. Sandy may be good at that, but we can't dedicate the training to the whole team based on one person's abilities.
Incidents that a team encounters can be vastly different as well, from diabetic episodes to severe injuries. So with that, how does having a written plan help with the team's response?
Well, I'll give you the classic response when we talk about plans, right? It's not the plan, it's the planning. And I'll add on to that also the exercise of the planning, right? That's all part of that planning process. So we've begun that again with reviewing our needs and our resources and our processes. So once we've got that first, we're sort of scratching out the idea. Maybe you think it's a great idea to have a house first aid response team, and maybe you alone are going to propose it, or maybe you've got some help. Great. Again, those needs, resources, processes, and that's a big part of your plan right there. But then we're going to be reviewing that and thinking about Well, you listed it, right? Diabetic episodes to severe injuries. Those are our needs. How we're going to put the resources realistically there. How we're going to have our processes to activate the team and make sure that 911 is called quickly. And when we're writing this stuff out, you want to keep asking, okay, but how will it really work? Like if it happened at 2:00 today or at 3:00 in the morning or when Wendy is on vacation, right? Or however, throw those ideas around, not because you want a plan that's necessarily going to be, 4 inches thick and a binder that no one's ever going to read, but by gosh, it covers every conceivable possibility. But you want to work through those exercises so you can have hopefully a focused plan that has those general guidelines. But man, those fundamentals, those guidelines are going to be the the foundation of anything that your response team might encounter. And once they've got their training and their practice, you let them pivot. They've got the foundations. The plan is the support. And we've thought about how it's really going to work, and then run them through exercises to see how they'll implement these foundations in your plan in different ways. And those exercises, I don't want to intimidate anybody. That could be as simple as, hey, let's get together over a cup of coffee and bounce a couple of ideas around about things that might happen and how we're going to deal with it. And make sure that then take a look at the plan and go, okay, does the plan work for this kind of stuff?
So, what should expectations be for volunteer members, and how can we define their roles during this process?
Well, I think the big part is to start by asking them, right? And I hate to keep coming back to it, but I really do think it is part of those, gauge resources, right? We don't want to presume, hey, Todd, I know Todd's an EMT and he's a volunteer firefighter, so he'd be great to be on the team. Well, maybe Todd has reasons to not want to be, or has concerns about liability for operating at the EMT level. Maybe Todd, because of state statutes or other regulations or uh, business policies, Todd can't operate at the EMT level and needs to operate at a first aid level, even though he's got some of that extra training and practice. So you really want to ask them and investigate, as I just said, what state or regional regulations and what employee policies might limit or what might limit the ability of the team members to perform as volunteers. And just make sure that those roles are clearly defined by policy and practice. So if we're going to say, there's going to be a stipend associated with this, or it's purely voluntary, who is going to be, are there insurance coverage questions that come into play? And understand that I don't necessarily mean, hey, every volunteer has to have insurance coverage, or they're just the questions that you're going to want to be ready to answer for the volunteers and for the employer and the workplace and the colleagues that aren't even on the team. So everybody kind of understands. You'd be ready to answer those questions. And again, see if you can get that codified in policy so that everybody understands, hey, when I'm working as a house first aid response team, if I go off-site, am I still part of the house first aid response team? What if there's a car accident right out front of work, but it's not on work property? Is there something that we have said as a volunteer, if I'm in work hours, that you expect me to go out and help? Because we don't want someone having a car accident in front of our business and no one came out to help, even though we have a first aid team. Or maybe your business takes the opposite and they say, look, we need to keep our resources for our people, and we don't want you going off site where there's a risk of injury for you working in a roadway, and now our response team is not available for our in-house. So it needs to be customized, but these are some of the questions that you want to think about and make sure that if at all possible, you've got a clear and easy to understand policy or other written documents, so that those volunteers understand what's expected of them, and know that they have the support of the organization and the response team.
So finally, as a first responder, how can in-house response teams make your job easier when you arrive, and how can their actions improve the outcome for a colleague who is in an emergency situation?
Oh, well, first aid response teams are so important. I mean, it's the first aid part, right? It's that they're first on scene. So a number of different ways. Number one, they're there to gather information. I mean, that's the first thing. And I don't mean you have to ask a patient about, did they have a history of, back pain in 1972 before you stop their bleeding, right? But they're the first there to see what's going on from a care provider context. So they're going to be able to give emergency responders, sometimes through radios or telephones, sometimes through our dispatch center, through 911. They're going to give us a better idea of what's going on so we can make sure that the right resources are going there to help. And that if we, as emergency responders or as a dispatcher, can offer different help, advice on what to do to the responder, again, they're first on scene. They're the ones who can see what's going on. And of course, provide that critical initial care, whether it's bleeding control or CPR. It's so crucial in so many situations to get that done immediately. And those initial reports are not just before we get there. Hopefully you can be on the phone with the dispatcher, give them some additional information. But also when we arrive on scene to give us that great patient handover, so that we're transferring care. I always let people know it's a handover, not a handoff. We're not handing off the patient as in, oh, great, you guys are here. I'm on the first aid response team, so I'm done. And, please don't stop doing CPR. The patient still needs that, We want to hand over so we have a smooth transition where it's as simple as something as, this person was anxious, and they had a cut, but we controlled the bleeding. It's no big deal. And hey, these are our EMTs and paramedics. They're going to take good care of you. No, smooth hand over that way to, hey, I arrived. Frank was having trouble breathing. He stopped breathing. We had to do CPR, and I'm going to continue doing CPR until you, the emergency responders, are set to take over. So really those big things, that initial scene size up, if you will, that first on scene care with initial reports and a great handover. So the person who's most important, the ill or injured person, from their perspective, they got that care quickly because you were there, and it was seamless from the care you started to the care we continue all the way to whatever the destination happens to be.
Well, Chief Duckworth, we're really grateful for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your insights on this topic with us. Thank you very much for being with us on the Safe Side this month.
No problem. I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it, like I say, and always enjoy working with first aid response teams, and thrilled to get the word out there. We love being partners with everybody.
With holiday celebrations, resolutions, and heaven forbid, some much deserved R&R, it's understandable if you haven't been spinning in tandem with the occupational safety sphere lately. That's why we bring you this latest installment of In Case You Missed It. I'll start with a discussion of a recent webinar that explored the link between work-related hearing loss and dementia. It was hosted by CPWR, the Center for Construction Research and Training, and included a panel of researchers and industry experts just exploring this topic, and certainly there's a lot that goes into it. But one of the speakers was Marianne Cloran, who's an associate professor of medicine at University of Maryland and also medical director for the Building Trades National Medical Screening Program. And she discussed a couple of studies, one of which she led, that found that the risk of dementia increased with the severity of work-related hearing loss. And additionally, she was co-author of a study that had found an association between occupational hearing loss and the higher risk of death. So one of a quotes that really stood out from what she said. She just said, quote, "It's one thing to lose your hearing, but it has other implications if it means you may die earlier or develop dementia," unquote. So in that vein, all these webinars certainly explore the problem at hand, but they're also diving into solutions. And this one talked about just the importance of a hearing conservation program at the workplace. And while it isn't going to magically cure dementia, so to speak, it's going to get ahead of these symptoms developing. So just some steps that were discussed in these programs were, one, to reduce noise where possible, and that can be easier said than done, of course, in construction and these other trades, but also to use effective hearing protection, to check the hearing tests of these noise exposed workers and try to find some temporary threshold shifts and then correct any conditions that might cause noise induced hearing loss. Also, just to test to diagnose this hearing loss in general. And also, there was a discussion about hearing aids. Studies lately have suggested that these may lower the risk of developing dementia among those with hearing loss. So, also recommended to provide workers with access to effective and affordable hearing aids. Alan, how about you?
Well, in case you missed it, there was a recently introduced Senate bill that seeks to bolster mental health for pilots and air traffic controllers and tries to get them to seek mental health care when needed. Senate Bill 3257 would direct the Federal Aviation Administration to revise existing regulations to encourage early disclosure and treatment of mental health conditions, consult with stakeholders, including mental health professionals and academic institutions conducting aviation training, to ensure future mental health policies reflect current clinical standards and realities of the aviation workforce. Conduct annual reviews related to the special issuance process for FAA medical certificates for pilots and air traffic controllers, as well as the classification and use of medication. And finally, improve mental health knowledge and training provided to aviation medical examiners. And the House passed a similar bill in September. Barry, what about you?
Well, Alan, you've taken us up in the air, and I'm going to bring us back down to the roadways. So I wanted to talk about two recent items that were published at safetyandhealthmagazine.com. One of them in the late fall, a bill that would amend the move over law in Massachusetts, which is, as everyone probably is aware in our audience, all 50 states have move over laws. If there is a emergency vehicle on the side of the road, you must slow down, you must move over. In Massachusetts, what they're trying to do is make that bill, that move over law in Massachusetts, cover utility workers as well. So if there's a utility vehicle on the side of the road, and what they've defined that as is a vehicle that's being used to install, maintain, repair, operate, or restore communication service, or electric or gas distribution, or transmission service that is owned or operated by a county or municipality. So any vehicle that falls under that umbrella is going to have those same move over protections as an emergency vehicle. And that bill passed in the Senate in Massachusetts by a 39 to nothing vote. And why is this important? So there's another study that recently came out by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety. And what they found, researchers have found that over a third of drivers fail to either slow down or even change lanes when approaching a roadway incident. And researchers, they interviewed traffic safety officials and they had focus groups that they put together with 135 drivers across 10 different states. And they also reviewed some video from traffic cameras. And that video showed about 12,000 vehicles. And 36% of the drivers in those videos did not change lanes and or did not slow down. And this is a problem because according to the AAA Foundation, there were 46 emergency responders that died after being struck by vehicles while working on the scene of a roadway incident last year. And that includes 26 law enforcement officers and 12 tow truck operators. So a really important change in Massachusetts, and something that, all of us as drivers should be aware of, is these move over laws.
Well, thank you both as always. Is there something you think we missed? Let us know at safehealth@nsc.org, and be sure to keep checking out news from around the safety world at safetyandhealthmagazine.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this month's episode of On the Safe Side. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of it with us wherever you choose to listen. You can check out any of our past episodes by visiting safetyandhealthmagazine.com safety+Health/podcasts, and that includes episode number 34 from December of 2022. And during that episode, we discussed head protection and how honing your listening skills can be beneficial for safety professionals. The original music for this podcast was composed by Steve Maslin. Thank you, Steve. And as always, we thank our NSC teammates behind the scenes who help make this podcast go. We'll be back next month to have more safety-related discussions, talk to trusted voices from around the profession, and hopefully make you smile a little. Until then, best wishes for a smooth transition into 2026. And as always, please stay on the safe side.